What is up, YouTube? I am back again after my rant from yesterday and looking to play a little bit of games. Hopefully this rant will be a much shorter rant. I don't even know if you call this a rant, to be honest. What it made me think about is with me starting to engage a lot more with content on the internet and dropping comments and having people talk back and reply back. I started thinking about what value I can add. So kind of sharing my thoughts and my opinions. I guess sort of like a podcast, but not really a podcast. I'm just playing video games and yapping. So I probably will just call this like my my masculinity and manhood series, probably. Just because I think that's going to be the common theme of what I'm talking about and thinking about right now. He's going to turn around, isn't he? Whack. Okay. Yes, you see me actively playing the game and chatting with you at the same time. So I did get distracted with me trying to get the guy down. But yeah, so I think the topic that I want to talk about today was how so many people are blaming their issues and the way that they are with them missing a parent or something of that nature. I can't believe he got me. Yeah, so people usually blame it based on like a missing parent or something of that nature. And for me, most of my childhood, I grew up without my father being around. And for the longest time, I used to think that was like not an issue, right? Because people usually quote all of the stats where, what did Obama say? I actually don't remember. Let me take a side note and look it up on the internet. And I'll tell you exactly what Obama said about children without a father in their life. Okay. I'm looking for it really quick. So, Obama said in his 2009 town hall fatherhood speech, he said children who grew up without fathers are more likely to drop out of school, wind up in prisons. They're more likely to have substance abuse problems, run away from home, become teenage parents themselves. That's the damage that absent fathers does to our families. And he said he also acknowledged his own experience. He says, I say this as someone who grew up without a father in his own life, in my own life. That doesn't mean that I didn't feel my father's absence. That's something that leaves a hole in a child's heart that a government can't fill. So I think that's, whether you like him or hate him, I think he dropped a ton of truth bombs there. I think he dropped a ton of truth bombs. We know that when we look at the statistics, we look at some of the outcomes, that fathers play a key role in our upbringing, and they usually act as that mirror or something that you're trying to aspire to be. And I always used to tell people that for me, it was important that my father may not have been the role model that I wanted to emulate, but I did take him as the person that I didn't want to be. Right? Those are all the what not to do's. And that wasn't, I used to think that was enough, but it turns out to be it wasn't, right? Because then I started having very negative views of fatherhood, very negative views of men, of manhood as a whole, and that's not healthy either, right? Because, as I said before, I am a Christian, so a lot of the text when we talk about God and how He portrays Himself in His text and His word, and He presents Himself with like male attributes, right? When we think about one of the stories in the Bible, when Jesus talks to a group of people, and He was talking to them and saying that if your child asks you for bread, would you give him a serpent? And that was just like asking a rhetorical question, right? Letting them know that He's like, if you being evil people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more would you believe about God, who's good, will be a great parent, right? And so it's kind of hard to kind of wrap your mind around if you have only negative views or apathetic views about fatherhood and a male presence. And I think the thing that really made it stand out to me, where I realized that like there was something wrong, was that I think it was one summer during Father's Day, and I was just like seeing the ad show up, and there's a whole bunch of women where it says Happy Father's Day, Happy Father's Day, Happy Father's Day. Thanks, Mom, for being both my mom and my dad. And I was like, well, I never saw my mom as my mom and my dad. My mom was just my mom, right? She was my mother. And the reason why I started thinking about that was because I was like, why do I feel like that is like an okay sentiment to hold, right? Why can't I acknowledge that fathers are important? Why can't I acknowledge that Mother's Day is for mothers and Father's Day is for fathers, right? So immediately it started making me think about the idea. Oh, I can't believe I died. But it started making me think about the idea that there was something wrong in terms of my purview, right? God wouldn't represent himself as a bad thing, right? So I had to start thinking about what did that mean and why did I think that way? And so that started me down the journey of trying to realize that, man, the only reason why I thought that fathers were bad was because my father was bad. And that if I became a father, I would want my kids to celebrate me, to know that that they can depend on me, that he look at me as an example of love, of care, of protection, of stability. So for me, that was just like, if those are things I plan to do as a father, those are all positive things. And so that's when it really started making me realize that, well, fathers are really important, and the devil is doing a really, really, really good job of making us look bad. So for me, it was an awakening for me to start thinking about things a lot more critically, and information that's being proposed to me. How some things may just seem like, benign, but it's a super serious thing when we belittle the necessary presence that a father plays. I'm not saying that some single mothers don't do a great job. My mother did a great job. I had great family members and support. I had a great grandmother, great aunts, that was able to really stem the tides and really help in raising me. But it still didn't change the way that I had to kind of think about and also consider what that meant, especially for eventually when I became a Christian, what that means, how do I convey the love of Christ, the love of the Father, the trust that we have for those individuals, why we believe the way that we believe. So, so I think for this one, it'll be interesting to hear other people's thought processes, right? Just because I think it's so common, especially in the U.S., and it's not just a black thing. It is a lot in terms of 70%, 75% of the households are fatherless, but it's all throughout Western society, which is a huge, huge issue. So many of my friends who are not even just like aren't black also had a similar issue. So I think what the push should be now is that, especially as men that we are today, that if we choose to have children, like I have no kids, and I was very intentional about that. I knew how kids were made, and because I decided to serve God young in my teenage years, I behaved as such. I never got myself into situations that would make me vulnerable to having kids before I wanted them outside of the context of marriage, which means usually abstinence, no sex before marriage. So it's, I don't know, I think it's an interesting topic, something I wanted to bring up and something I wanted to kind of put out in the space, because I think it's such an important conversation to have, especially in today's climate, where we're saying that basically there's no difference and there's no benefit for having that balance between both parents. I believe that both the mother and your father provides unique but necessary principles that we need to grow. Otherwise, if they weren't necessary, God would have made it so that we needed both parents. So yeah, so that was my rant for so far, and things I kind of realized and learned. And are just, I don't know, topics that are on my mind. So this one might not be too long. Once I finish this stage, I think I'm gonna call it quits and then wrap this video up, but probably rant on a different topic in a different video. Let me max them out really quick. Oh, I don't have enough. Okie doke. All right, let's keep going. But yeah, so boom, got him. So yeah, so it's an interesting thought process, and I think that the fact that we've gotten so polarized for really silly things that most people used to agree with, that were just showing the fact that children needed both parents, it's kind of crazy to me. So yeah, so that's just my thought process, having a person who was raised by a single mother, and recognizing the effects. I don't say that it left a huge hole, but it definitely made it harder to understand why God would represent himself as a father. And in most cases, many of us don't have a good view of fathers simply because we haven't had the privilege sometimes of them growing up and being able to see them as a dependable and trustworthy and protecting figure in our lives. So yeah, so I think it's an important perspective to have, and also kind of be aware of some of the thoughts that we have and start questioning, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we think what we think? Are those thoughts healthy? How does that affect the way that we want to move through the world? How does that affect the way that we see our faith? Do you truly engage in it the way that we biblically should? Right? Can we be good image bearers? So yeah, so those are just thoughts that I have for this series. So yeah, so I think I'm gonna cut it there, and I will see you guys in the next video after you see me get these things. We'll see how far I get with these different, I'm putting air quotes, rants as we go through this. All right, so see you guys on the next one.